Hi, everyone.
Hello. More legalistic distinctions and technicalities at the top of page 254 of In Search of Christian Freedom in the chapter Legalism, Opponent of Christian Freedom. Ray starts, "Nor is this a case of mere hypothetical examples. Many actual cases have been dealt with in precisely this manner, including situations involving witness women who worked in PX stores on military bases and whose selling of such items as foodstuffs, cosmetics, etc. in that location somehow made them guilty of supporting the overall objectives of the military, and hence blood guilty. Elders have actually taken disfellowshipping action against a man simply for working in pest and rodent control, exterminating roaches and mice, because this work was regularly performed on a military base. Those viewed as infringing the Society's policy are given a period of time, perhaps 6 months, to cease such employment. And if they do not do so, they either are disfellowshipped or are declared disassociated, the results being in reality the same."
Consider another example from the manual as proposed in this same section. Example: a brother owning a plumbing business receives a call to do emergency repairs on a broken water pipe in the basement of a local church. Sometime later, a representative of the church contacts another brother, a builder, about putting a new roof and addition on the church. Comments: the first brother concludes that, as a human service, his conscience would permit him to care for the emergency situation, though advising the church to seek another plumber for any regular work. Likewise, likely few would be critical of his helping anyone during an emergency or view him as reprehensible. The second brother realizes that even though he has put roofs and additions on many homes and businesses, for him to contract to do so in the case of the church would be lending considerable support to the advancement of false worship. It would not be just an incidental contact, such as the postman's delivering mail or an act of humanitarian aid in a desperate situation. It would be a major undertaking that would involve lengthy work on a building used exclusively for the advancement of false worship, aiding in the perpetuation of Babylon the Great. As a Christian, he could not do that.
By saying, quote, "as a Christian he could not do that," unquote, the manual simply means that if he does, he will be subject to disfellowshipping. This, too, is not hypothetical in the least. In the chapter that follows, the extremes to which this policy can be carried are illustrated. Such policies illustrate clearly that the organization is indeed run from the top down and not from the bottom up. What this actually results in is a usurping of the individual's exercise of personal conscience, accomplished by superimposing on his conscience the rulings legislated by the organizational leadership, rulings made binding and enforceable through disfellowshipping decrees.
The examples given only touch the surface. Since then, many additional rules have been made. There seems to be nothing on which the organization is not willing to legislate. A question from the readers in the June 15, 1982 Watchtower even rules on whether a witness can submit to medical treatment in which, to reduce the risk of stroke by blood clot, or other purposes, a leech is used to draw off blood. The answer, based on a very wandering type of argument, is no.
I remember the change that happened in my first few years in the Watchtower when I first got there in 1970-71. Although smoking was frowned upon, you were still allowed to be a member of the congregation even if you'd smoked all your life, and were still attending meetings and were in good standing. And then suddenly, I think it was just after I was baptized, it became a law that anyone who was smoking would be automatically disfellowshipped, and they were given several months to get themselves straight. And then the law was laid down. And that, along with the gun law that happened to my roommate, who had been a pioneer, but now was a policeman, I think it started the vibrations going in me that, well, this isn't exactly just new light and refinements of existing principles. It's a laying down of the law where there was no law. You saw no law, no necessity of law before, but now you're making one.
Yeah, it's hard to understand how they don't see that as being parallel to the Pharisees.
Yeah. It didn't sit well with me at the time, but I didn't make much of it, like most of us.
It was like the beards thing too.
The beards
Don't
and the
have
church.
beards. I remember talking about it with other witnesses and thinking it was kind of silly, but it wasn't enough to make you think, okay, well, better leave this group. I just thought it was kind of silly, and certainly thought it was unscriptural.
There's also a note in here, a footnote, fairly thick one, at the bottom of page 254 on the issue of the use of Scripture in Isaiah 2:4, that being the determinative Scripture to judge whether one is involved in some kind of violation of neutrality, working, for instance, on a military base. And here's how Ray lays that out. He says, in actuality, the prophecy of Isaiah 2 verse 4 is simply that, a prophecy. It is not set forth as the basis for some kind of laws or for a code of rules, but simply foretells the peace-giving effects of God's acting among the nations on behalf of his covenant people, Israel. A California University faculty member, commenting on the expression in violation of Isaiah 2:4, said, quote, how in the world do the witnesses imagine that just because the Bible foretells a peaceful world, no one now must take a job washing the floors of an army base? Might as well say that just because Isaiah 11 prophesies that the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice den, that is a snake, parents now should let their children go into a snake pit. One might also ask why the prophecy of Joel 3 verse 10 should not be applied with comparable force when it contrastingly says, beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. And that's a good point, because the one in Joel, which is written approximately the same era as the Isaiah one, that's an actual command, whereas the Isaiah text that the Watchtower is using is a prophecy. So it's about real life. And real life says, of course, that in the real world that all of us live in, somebody is given the sword, and God is the one who delivers up the sword. More about that and the misapplication of text in the next segment, which is called Unbalanced Thinking.